Most school leaders assume that architecture is about aesthetics, making spaces look nice, but that fundamentally misses the point. The truth is, every corridor, every classroom, every cafeteria is either enabling or constraining what's possible for student learning and belonging. When you walk into a parking deck late at night versus a light filled library, your body responds differently. Students experience this every single day in our schools. And right now, most school spaces are designed like institutions, places that signal compliance over connection, control over collaboration. But if we keep building schools that look and feel like hospitals or government buildings, we're programming students to show up the same way people show up to those places, disconnected, disengaged, just trying to get through it. And when we reimagine untapped spaces, when we transform corridors into collaboration zones, when we rethink the stage as a multi-use teaching space, and when we give students ownership over their environment, we create the physical framework for belonging, leadership, and authentic learning to emerge. Today's guest, Anne Seeley, is an architect who doesn't just design buildings, she designs experiences. She's going to walk us through how one school doubled student talk in classrooms, how another school created equity through strategic bus drop-off design, and why breaking the box on what spaces should be unlocks possibilities most leaders never consider. I'm Danny Bauer. This is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for visionary leaders who want to do school different, even within a traditional system, so that we create campus experiences worth showing up for. Thanks to Ruckus Makers just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of nearly 4 million podcasts worldwide. Thanks for pressing play. We'll be back with the main conversation after just a second as we get in some messages from our show sponsors. Looking to create the kind of campus experience students never forget? ODP Business Solutions transforms ordinary spaces into extraordinary learning environments. Visit odpbusiness.com/education and let's do school different. That's odpbusiness.com/education. School district challenges don't look the same everywhere right now. Some are seeing hiring improve. Others are still navigating staffing gaps and increasing demands. Frontline Education's 2026 K-12 Lens Report helps connect those dots with insights from more than 1,000 school leaders nationwide. You can get the full picture at frontlineeducation.com/leaders. Get the full report at frontlineeducation.com/leaders. If you could differentiate instruction in 20 minutes or less, would you do it for all your students? Well, you can with IXL. Over 1 million teachers use IXL because it empowers them to use effective data-informed instruction. And you can get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right, and Anne, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Danny. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you as well. You know, the whole sort of point of view of the show is like, how do we reimagine the project of education even within traditional settings, so that we create campus experiences worth showing up for? And you really play a big part in turning that campus experience into something that's actually worth showing up for, from just not in terms of necessarily like what the curriculum is or whatever, but like the space is gorgeous. I want to be here, right? Like how I feel, in my home office or whatever. So anyways, super stoked to dig into these topics.
No.
Maybe we can start with painting a picture of like before and after work that you did with Ravenscroft in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah, certainly. And before I really delve in, I think you hit on a really key point of a lot of what I want to talk about, and Ravenscroft is a
Yeah.
fabulous example of that. And that's, you alluded to it, that architecture is really and truly, it's the background in which we live all of our lives. Our
Right.
body is just continuously taking in input from the surrounding world and we're processing it. And so when we're in a space that makes us feel safe, which makes us feel comfortable, which brings in a lot of daylight, it is so much
Mm.
easier for our bodies to then respond and really do the work of deep learning, like to be able to do that thinking and that excitement. And
Yeah.
so, so Ravencroft, for an instance, I started working with them in 2019. Now, that might sound like a long time ago, but if you think of how long it takes to design and then construct a building, which is about 4 to 5 years, 2019 is
Okay.
not that far ago.
Sure.
But the school is an independent school. They've got kids from pre-K all the way to high school, and they were really struggling with there was not a strong, cohesive community space for the students.
Mm.
And what they were seeing is that along with rising anxiety, many high schoolers are experiencing levels of disengagement, which happen over and over again. They were looking for a way to like re-knit the community. So the task put in front of us as a programmatic space was, can you get us more space for people to eat? Can you
Mm.
build some spaces for students to connect? So we went from there and we really did a lot of listening. And what we heard is that talking to students, talking to staff, talking to teachers, is what they needed is truly a heart, a center for the school. And they needed a
Mhm.
space that allowed a lot of variety of environments. So they needed spaces for quiet reflection. They needed space for community gathering. They really needed a space that students could claim as their own. So then they walked into the room, they felt like they belonged and they felt like they had ownership and could really take over autonomy of their learning and their interactions happening in that space. And so what
Mhm.
we did is we designed, it's 2 stories. We took out one of the existing wings of their old gym. It's right in the heart of campus. It's right off of their main quad. And we replaced this with this very tall 2 story glassy element. The front portion of it is dining, and it's got windows that go all the way up. And so when you come in, it now becomes a beacon. It's the entry point that you can see as you're coming into the back half of the school, the academic quad of the school. And it's light filled. When students come into this space, they have the opportunity to gather with their friends instantaneously. You also, when you're within the space, even standing in the center, you can look to the left and you can see daylight coming in and you can see students studying all the way down to one end of their building. And you look to the other direction and you see other students sitting and studying. And they're not just studying in one format. It's not like they're in closed rooms, they're on couches, they're at individual desks, they're at group settings, there's closed conference rooms. There's all different varieties of space, up to and including that large dining area. And the dining area, even then, has some booth seatings, some large group seatings. So students have the opportunity to choose in whatever format they're in how engaged and sociable they want to be versus how
Mhm.
much they want to have that opportunity to sort of sit back and reflect. And even when they're sitting back and they're reflecting and they're physically by themselves, they're still visually connected to other people. And the end result for the building actually opened right as the students were coming back from being off from COVID.
Oh,
Within that
wow. Mhm.
first, oh, so it was amazing timing. But from that
Mhm,
first
mhm.
week, as the students came in, they took immediate ownership. I was talking to individuals, they're like, this place has been here. It feels as though it has been here for years instead of having just
Mm.
opened. It was as though, again, by defining that environment, the sense of ownerships, the students just they walked right in, they claimed it as their own, and you can see even now you can be there at 7 o'clock in the morning. There are people in there, and you can come at 7 o'clock at night, and there are people in there and using the space. So that for me is an amazingly successful project where you're creating that framework for the
Mhm.
excitement, for the engagement, for that community building to really come to the forefront.
Right on. Yeah. I mean, give me a bunch of glass and light, and I'm gonna be there.
Yeah.
There was some when I was living overseas. I don't know if you knew that I lived in
No.
Netherlands, Belgium, Scotland too. And in some of those places, like, the climate isn't necessarily like ideal, right? It's not like super sunny and warm. I mean, it doesn't get like as crazy winters that I get here in Syracuse, but they really maximize light there.
Yeah.
Like it's just something I experienced. It was like, wow, this is so awesome. And there was always plants around. There was always a lot of light, and that made me happy.
It
Like
does.
it doesn't have to be complex, like big windows, lots of light,
Yeah. And
plants,
yeah,
and it's
and
good.
no, it's true. And interesting enough, like that has been like studied we call it biophilic design in architecture, but that has like been proven over and over again. It's like the 1980s that the more you can bring
Okay.
in daylight and the
Yeah,
more you can bring in plants and like just the connection to nature, it has that
sure.
really amazing grounding effect on our sympathetic nervous
Okay.
system, which is
Right. Well, what was it called? Bio what?
biophilia or biophilic
Biophilia.
design. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that gets to, just the contrast between like beautiful design and I don't know if I call it institutional design, but something that comes up every now and then in these conversations is like,
Yeah.
why are our schools looking like the government,
Hmm.
a hospital, the DMV,
Yes.
God forbid a jail, like
Yeah.
places nobody wants to be. But this is how our school, like many schools, are designed.
Yeah.
Stupid. I don't get it.
No. Well, and it's true. And the interesting part is as an architect, what I always want to try and do with a school is to reimagine those institutional
Yeah.
spaces and say,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
rather than giving a name to something, rather than saying, well, this is a classroom. I know what a classroom looks
Hmm.
like. It's going to have walls.
Okay.
This is a corridor. This is a cafeteria. I want to say, well, what if this space, instead of giving it a name, is a space for uh, engagement? What if there's a
Hmm.
space for imparting knowledge? What if this
Hmm.
other space over here becomes a zone for peer to peer instruction? And when you start naming the activity that could happen in there, it breaks down our association of what the space looks like and feels like and starts to give us opportunities to reimagine it, to rethink
Yeah.
those possibilities.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you start talking about collaborative space versus classroom, right? Collaborative space. I'm like, huh, what is that? And now my mind is
Mhm.
like dreaming about it versus classroom. And you think of the desks and the rows and the
Yes,
chalkboard and
exactly.
whiteboard, whatever. So interesting.
Yeah.
How did reinventing that space? So I mean, bring us back. Like
Yeah.
it sounds like the kids took full ownership over it
Did.
right away, right after COVID,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But how did that live out the goal to create student leaders?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the school's one of its values and mission statements is it had an initiative called Lead from Here. So there was already a
Okay.
curriculum in place, but the idea is creating that infrastructure. So again, rethinking a space. Instead of me designing a cafeteria, I
Mm.
was designing a large scale collaboration zone, an incubator that could be a lot of different things. There was a lot of they had originally described it as conference rooms, and I said, well, let's take that nomenclature away. What if we thought about those as visually connected collaboration zones, right? So when we start thinking
Mhm.
about reimagining a right the purpose for this, they had this one really cool. It's on the first floor. It's right as you come in. Can be a conference room. It's got closed walls, but it's mostly glass and the students they can reserve it, but what they did is they started to write on the walls right away, and so these walls then became this documentation of student thoughts, student expression, thinking through like how it became their space, right? And so the idea of creating leaders, self-autonomous individuals working on their own authentic learning journey, these spaces where they feel not compelled, but they feel enabled to engage with the space itself, right on the walls,
Mm.
right on the marker boards,
Mhm.
to reserve the conference room yourself, right? Like we do that in a work environment, but in a
Mhm.
school environment, usually it's in a traditional format, you think it's the teacher who chooses the location. Well, here, the
Yeah.
student gets to pick it. They get to make that reservation themselves. They're on their own for the leadership. So that the space itself is creating that. The other way this space really helps develop the sense of leadership is the building is located right between the middle school and the high school. So one of our other charges was how do you scaffold leadership qualities from a middle school level mindset
Mm.
all the way until these
Mhm.
students become high school students, at
Yeah.
the end
Yeah.
of graduation. And so we started building in types of zones, right? So you can envision that when the middle schoolers first come here, there's some areas where they can still be over watched by a teacher, right? So that there is some
Yeah.
level
Yeah.
of control, but they have ability within that larger space to break out and do their own studying quiet group work or something else. But by the time they get to high school, they can have a whole afternoon of maybe free periods where they can move
Mm.
around that zone. So they're given the autonomy to choose where they want to sit, to be in the study hall, to get their work done, maybe to set up a conference room or ask one of their advisors to come over and advise them. So it became a space where, because it's not owned by an teacher, there's no one claiming land to these various
Mhm.
sitting or conference rooms. They feel owned and contained by the students themselves, which really gives them both a sense of ownership, leadership, but also a sense of belonging into that zone.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Teachers could be possessive about stuff at times, so
Right.
that's interesting. I was in a go ahead, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, but it's true. Like if you're in a teacher's classroom, well, they own the desk, right?
Mm.
You can't be on the
Yeah,
desk.
yeah.
You probably can't pull all the things off of their walls, but you go into an unclaimed space and it's like, oh, it's all mine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. No, that's cool, and I think something that I'm always talking to Ruckus Makers about, and there's a dance there. There's a tension between making sure teachers feel respected and honored,
Hmm.
and that they have agency and all of that, but also so do the students, right?
Yeah.
But not at the cost of teachers. It's like, how do we invite more voices and give more agency and ownership away to everybody? But anyways, I was going to say, just reflecting on my days leading a campus, many challenges, of course, some being, teachers who clearly hate children, right? Like that's a challenge.
It
It's
is.
true, but
It is.
but they
Yeah.
exist and somehow they find their way into the profession. Uh, Crazy board of education, that's a
Gosh.
challenge.
Yes.
And then parents can be a challenge. So I don't want you to weigh in on any of those. That's my perspective. But with parents, right,
Yeah.
specifically, depending on the community, but I'm thinking of a middle school I led last, high school too, I guess,
Mhm.
drop off and pick
Oh
up.
gosh. Yes.
And man, lots of opinions there, and you
Lots of.
always screw it up.
Yeah.
And I think you worked with a school on that, right? So
Yeah.
how'd it go? Did you make everybody happy?
No one is ever always happy.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Okay.
yeah, no. So another school I worked on, you hit on it, is it's a public school, so not Ravenscroft, which is an independent school. This one
Okay.
is in Wake County. It's Hilltop Needmore Road Elementary, and it was a really, again, all schools are unique, but this one was really intriguing in that it was a shared site with a community center.
Mm,
So, interesting enough, so that's a very different population of people
yeah.
coming onto the site. There's a lot of discussion about how you engage or integrate these groups. The other big piece is, when you think about school and school safety, one of the biggest pieces early on from a design end is making sure that you have just physical separation of students as they're walking from other vehicles. And this is just like purely at a level
Sure.
of you don't want the kid to accidentally get injured, right?
Right,
Uh,
right, right.
by stepping in front of a car too soon. So, interesting enough, what we did is traditionally the car line is sort of the front and primary space, right? But what that does is it gives precedence to families who can take their kids to school,
Mm,
who have the ability to drive. And the students who were having to ride the bus were dropped off in a less than desirable backdoor location off the back of the building for school
mhm,
separation. But what we did here at this school is we made sure that there were two primary entrances. And in fact, where the bus drop off happens, that is the entry that also fronts the community center. So it has a very strong prominence to the um, front of the road, so that
mhm,
you see that bus drop off, and it has a beautiful canopy with connections out. So there's this beacon that you can see because the school is set a little bit further back from the road that highlights this. So that as the students are coming in for their bus drop off, they feel as though they're welcome. They feel as though this is an entry point. At the same time, the other one, the car line drop off. Um, if you have ever sat through car line, there is a enormous number of people driving cars that you may have to be waiting in for pickup and drop off.
mhm,
And so that one actually loops off to the side of the building. And by looping off to the side of the building, it met the purely, strategic need of getting enough cars in the line to not have them back out
Right.
onto the main road. But it also meant that we were not forefronting those who had the ability to drive. So we were thinking about it from a social and a psychological perspective, as well as just the nuts and bolts of your infrastructural. How many
Hmm.
lines of cars can you fit in here? And that school is really wonderful because these two entry points, they come in at, I would say, like perpendicular angles, and they meet right in front of a sort of central gathering area. We called it the bridge. So you would come in from the bus drop off past the gym and the music room, and then the car line drop off comes in off of sort of the side of the admin, and they meet in this beautiful glassy space that allows you to look out onto the courtyard, which is also where outdoor dining happens. So both of these
Mm.
groups, as they're brought into the space, are immediately greeted with a sense of welcome. And that's their
Hmm.
experience every day as they come into the building.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
It's good. I mean, that belonging piece, that welcoming piece, so important.
yeah.
You were telling me that architecture is a framework for life. What do you mean about
Gosh,
that?
well, I mean, I think you were saying something about your office that makes you happy. Like architecture
Hmm.
physically it's the backdrop, it's the framework, is the physical infrastructure in which we walk into every day, and it
Yeah.
it impacts us whether we're aware of it or not. I mean, if you think about it, if you are walking into, let's say, a parking deck. All right, we've all been into a parking deck, and it's late at
Hmm.
night and the lights aren't very bright, right? There's a little bit of a wind blowing through it. There's a sense of, this is not the space I really want to be in. And your body might tense up a
Sure.
little bit. You're probably going to be looking around. Parking decks architecture, whether we like to think of it as
Hmm.
high architecture and design, it's still a
Mm.
built piece, right? So you're getting sensory inputs that this is maybe not a good, safe place. Whereas, let's think of another space of architecture. Maybe you walk into like a library, right? It's
Hmm.
the main library for your county, and it's got this beautiful double height entry space. There's color. There's probably people chatting in the background, not loud, but there's conversations happening. You can see
Mm.
easily books off to one side, maybe a lecture or conversation area to another side. When you're starting to see these inputs and sense of community, and there's probably light coming in off of one side, again, you're gonna feel more comfortable. When you hear the sound, when you feel that ownership, our bodies start to relax. We feel this level of, this is a space where I want to be, where I feel like I belong in that area. And when you feel as though you belong, you're much willing to open up and look around and start to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. How can schools reimagine untapped spaces within their campuses?
Yeah, so I love that term. So reimagine those untapped
Hmm.
spaces, because if schools are always talking. As a former school leader, we're always talking about, well, we don't have enough space for the classrooms, we don't have enough office spaces, we don't have enough storage spaces. I
Yeah.
would also add in, many times we don't have enough space for connection, whether it's connecting to the community or students connecting to each other. So
Hmm.
if I take this idea of framework, right, the architecture is framework, and I reframe it, I reimagine it. Corridors are one of my favorite ones to think about. If you take a corridor, regular school corridor is probably 6 feet wide, about as tall as a person.
Okay.
If you widen that out, let's say 4 more feet, you've now got
Hmm.
this fairly gracious feeling, but you still only probably need about 6 feet to walk down. You didn't increase the amount of space two people need to walk past each other. But what you did
Right.
do is you now started to create a zone. And so, in reimagining a corridor, I like to think of them as directly outside of a classroom. With that 4 extra feet, I can start carving out a niche, maybe for students to do a quick pull-out session with a teacher directly outside of their
Mm.
classroom. Or you can envision that maybe classrooms start to sort of merge around this open corridor space, creating a pod zone where now all 5 classrooms can all spill out into a common collaborative space. And maybe I'm just going down the thought process. Maybe it's a middle school, and you've got your math and your science and your social studies, your English, and two of those classrooms are going to do a joint project. In English, you're
Mm.
studying gosh, my kids are learning about the West right now. So they're learning about
Okay.
pioneers in your social studies, and in your science, you're going to work on building a paddle boat that can move. And so now you're cross-pollinating between these spaces. You're creating engagement, you're creating interest because the students are working hands-on something. And that's because you were able to rethink what that corridor could be, right? It wasn't just a corridor anymore. It suddenly became something else. Another one that is one of my personal interests that I'm currently iterating on a couple of different projects is the role of the theater or the stage, really, in elementary schools. And I say that because if you think about it, the stage, even at middle school level, it probably gets used once to twice a day, right? You have maybe a music or band class, maybe you have a theater program. But for a school that is trying to maximize every square inch of its use,
Right. Yeah, sure.
reimagining what that could be is really important. Going back to the Hilltop School, what we did with it is we put it um, across from it's connected to the cafeteria. So the primary stage opens up to the cafeteria, and it remains open all day. And that is because we envisioned, I'm not sure how it actually plays out yet, but we envisioned that students could come up there and, if allowed, they could eat up there. It also brings daylight into it, but the real excitement for me of this stage is that curtain has the ability to not just be a curtain, but it actually has a folding wall that can close. So it can close to the cafeteria, and then the backside of the stage can open up. And it opens at a smaller scale, but to the corridor, so you can have smaller collaboration. It has that folding wall, has a marker board on it. So now you have an extra teaching space that opens up to the corridor. So that stage, which maybe is only used one time in the former situation, can now be used multiple times during the course of the day. And then during after school hours, right, with the aftercare program, students can get up on there, and it also becomes a zone for watching out for parent pickup. It's right next to that entry. So it now gets to serve 3 different purposes rather than just one once or twice a day.
Yeah, just maximizing what you have. That's
Maximize,
great.
yeah. I was going to say, and I say not just maximizing what you have, but I think intentionally realizing how some of those spaces that you do have you're not maximizing for them for storage or for other pieces, but you're really trying to emphasize, at least over and over in my perspective, is those moments of connection and collaboration. I think that's the piece that is most exciting for me is how it gets used in the aftercare program when it does fully open up to both sides,
Yeah.
those connection
Yeah.
pieces.
That's great. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Now, picture this: a learning environment so engaging students forget to check their phones. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what we helped the Lago Academy create. Their secret? Working with ODP Business Solutions to build collaborative spaces that actually work. We didn't just deliver furniture, we delivered a completely new way of learning. From tech integration that makes lessons come alive, to flexible spaces that adapt to any teaching style, to sustainable solutions that reduce your carbon footprint. We're here to help you do school different. And the best part, you get it all from a single supplier. All to help you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Staffing, student support operations, technology, these challenges are often discussed separately, but they're deeply connected. Frontline Education's 2026 K-12 Lens Report helps bring those connections into focus, showing how districts are navigating multiple pressures at once. With insights from over 1,000 school leaders, Frontline Education's K-12 Lens Report offers a clearer view of what's changing and how leaders are adapting their strategies. Explore these insights by visiting frontlineeducation.com/leaders. Get the insights of over 1,000 school leaders at frontlineeducation.com/leaders. As a school leader, time is your greatest resource, and there is a real sense of urgency when it comes to getting students what they need right now. That's why I love IXL's Universal Screener. In 20 minutes or less, you can identify students in need of intervention. And IXL's Learning Adaptive platform makes differentiating instruction easy. As students learn, IXL adjusts to the right level of difficulty for each individual student. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. You know, I'm totally an amateur and novice, and not a professional in this, but it sounds like it could all be very expensive, right? To make these changes and that kind of thing. So is that true, or is that, just something I have in my head?
Well, it depends, right? Because there are
Hmm.
ways to do it very expensively. You can go top of the line, high end
Right.
materials and all these pieces. But if you think about it, let's take a household example. If you're going to tear down your house and rebuild it, that's pretty expensive. But let's say
Mhm.
you want to renovate your mudroom, right? You're going to
How
turn
did you know?
everybody needs their mudroom renovated, especially at the end of winter.
The It was like 1970s vinyl,
Yes.
really gross floor that I ripped up. Thank
Hmm.
God no asbestos. We did click and tile. It looked like granite, so
Yep.
it was more affordable. New washer and dryer, accent wall,
Yep.
right? And cabinets. Looks like a I basically want to put a very nice chair in there and just read, have coffee. Basically, if 80% of my day could be in that room because I redid it, it's now my favorite room. Yeah.
Yes, right? And so that's when so you can take, I would say, surgical insertions into school and do things like that
Hmm.
without ever increasing space. Another instance, thinking again about corridors, I've seen it where at high schools we see as students get more and more into this one-on-one lap personal device
Sure,
situation,
sure.
those they don't need all the lockers because they're not carrying 100 books around with them anymore.
Yeah, right.
So that surgical insertion is what happens if you take those lockers out. That's not
Hmm.
4 feet, but it is 3 feet that you've
It's a lot.
instantaneously, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And you've gained that by a very minor investment. You add in some paint, you add in either some carpet tiles or some flooring, or just literally putting some chairs strategically placed with a marker board behind them. And you've already created these moments of collaboration along the hall. And so I say it can kind of be whatever you want, right? And
Yeah.
it's at a scale in terms of the budget.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Are there any things that a ruckus maker can do, design wise and making the campus a better place, even if they're not working with an architecture firm?
Yeah. One of the pieces I suggest, and I'm going to cite another campus we're working with right now. It's a Grace Christian School. And they had a wonderful vision, and they had already started the process. They just needed a little bit of help to get them there. And
Hmm.
what it was is they were spanned across two campuses right across from each other, but they were separated by a highway. And
Mm.
what they were saying over and over again is, we need a singular campus. We need a place where our whole community can come together. And they had already started that process, that imagination moment of figuring out what we call a key driver can be. So as a ruckus maker, as a school leader, making sure that they have this clear vision, and it can be a vision about a big campus master plan where you're trying to change everything, which is what was happening at
Mm.
Grace Christian,
Right.
or it can be something as small as my when I first walk in to my entry, it's really the carpeting is pretty old and it's really drab and it's all gray. Is there a way we can put this beautiful mural along one wall and create color and light, a sense of light and brightness, and maybe create a message that the school can give back? So again, that sense of as people are walking in, that they are part of that community, that they're engaged. Those are moments within the school day that really have a big payback for bringing students into the space and making them feel comfortable.
Right on.
So. Yeah.
And we're going to include on the website, just so people know, for this show, like pictures that
Yeah.
show some of the work, that you've done. And you were mentioning you're going to give me this like flyover,
Yeah.
whatever type of video, for people to check out.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring that up, people like what they see and that kind of thing, and they want to potentially partner with you.
Oh my gosh.
How should they reach out, or what does
Okay.
that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, one of my greatest joys in life is
Mm,
working with schools. And again, it doesn't matter if it's small and tiny and just getting ideas, or big scale, trying to figure out how to plan out a campus and how much space you need. I would say, first steps on this is very much, again, making sure you have a clear vision. Now, it doesn't have to be down to, I need 7 different chairs and this, but it's like, what is the outcome, right? What do you
mhm,
want your students to feel, your teachers to feel, the parents and the community to feel when they come into that space? What are those psychological needs and maybe programmatic needs that need to happen? And then your architect would love to come in and listen and start asking more and more questions. So they're extracting information. And then as an architect, my role is to problem solve. I'm a spatial problem solver, is a
mm,
way I like to think of it. So I take all these inputs of what you're needing, the hopes, the dreams, your goals, the physical limitations of your budget, and start kind of sketching some ideas. So in terms of, getting in contact with architect, the goal would be find with somebody who wants to listen to you, making sure they're ready and willing to listen, hear your voice. And by your voice, I mean the voice of the school community. And then you kind of move forward with them. Most architects will also willingly sort of do that initial sit down and visioning at a very high level, just to build the relationship. Because so much of, for us, the joy comes in trying to help the school leaders and making those moments of excitement and sense of belonging. So, I don't know if I quite answered your question on that one, but I think that's sort of the first step for an architect is again that listening, and then we move through what we call the design process, and that's where we go in the black box and come up with ideas
mm,
and keep presenting them back. But for a school leader, I think again being willing and open to hearing how their ideas can play out in the physical realm is important,
yeah.
and then having that again that vision or that driver of what it is you want it to do for your students. It's pretty,
Right, right. Got it. Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have your information in the show notes and all that kind of stuff.
All
So,
right, sounds good.
people can explore that way. So I'd love to ask you, last three questions I ask all my guests. And so one of those is if you could put a marquee,
Mm,
one message on all school marquees for a single day, what would your message be?
yeah, I think I'd say break the box. What else could happen here? And because again, we're so often we're trapped in what this, an element that we've named what it should be and what it should do. And if we can
Mm,
break it, if we can rip it up, I mean, could that box, like think back to when you were 4, could the box be a rocket ship? Could it actually
yeah,
be a boat or a roadway, or can you rip it up and it becomes a grass skirt?
yeah,
What
for
can you do
sure.
with a classroom or the cafeteria or your entry point? Yeah.
The other interesting thing about the box too is like, as an uncle to my nephews that I love so dearly, I want to get them the most legendary gifts ever.
Yeah.
And really all I had to get them was a stupid cardboard
Oh yeah.
box. Like why did I spend anything on this, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's
But
like they just needed a box to jump inside and build a fort
yes.
or whatever.
And the
So,
markers to color on it, right? Because
yeah.
the beauty of that box, and
Mm,
one of the reasons they love it is they get to use their imagination, but that box is
yeah.
theirs, right? There's no
Mm,
external input coming in.
mhm.
And I think the greatest joy anybody has is suddenly getting to make, the imprint on something. That's why we love buying our own house. It suddenly becomes
Yeah.
ours that we get to take ownership and craft in our own way. So break the
Right. You
box.
can mold it, blank canvas, right on.
Yep.
If you were building your dream school, and you didn't have any constraints in terms of resources, but your only limitation was your ability to imagine, what would be the three guiding principles of your dream
Yeah.
school?
Right. I think first it all comes back to connect. I would say make sure we're connecting to nature. The teacher, everyone's connecting to one another, and then making sure that we're embracing variety and differentiation. And that makes sure that everyone feels comfortable and safe. And I will say, I get the luxury of designing other people's dream schools all the time, and it is amazing to watch them unfold.
Yeah, that seems very satisfying for
It is.
sure. And then you could drive by and say, "Hey, look
Yeah,
what we
it's like,
did,"
"I did
right?
that."
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
pretty neat.
yeah,
We covered a lot of ground today of everything we discussed. What's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
yeah. Space matters. It matters incredibly so much. Again, if we think of space as the backdrop from which everything else happens, and then we can reimagine how we interact with those spaces and rethink it, it drives so much of what you can do as an educator, creating those zones and those spaces for the deep learning, for the risk taking, for the sense of play to emerge
Mm.
in students' lives and teachers' lives.
Hey, Ruckus Maker, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. And before you go, if today's show shifted something in your mind or sparked an idea about how you could do school different, then I think you'd be a great fit for what we call the Ruckus Maker Mastermind. The Mastermind's a private community of innovative school leaders who meet weekly to grow, reflect, and disrupt the status quo. You can create the campus experience your staff and students deserve. Applications are now open, and go to betterleadersbetterschools.com/apply to put your application in.